Hello and welcome to the podcast. Apologies because tonight's episode is one of those late night recordings, so I have to keep my voice down. Alright, so this is going to be the final installment, so part 6, part 7, part whatever, where we talk about podcasting, we talk about content marketing, how you can use podcasting as a tool for building a brand and ultimately for growing your sales. So this is going to be the final episode, and for those of you who have been listening along, it's the same series that was inspired by a listener of the podcast. Let's call him Shinorambo, who is in the financial services sector and wealth advisory in Nigeria. And he decided that starting a podcast was going to be a good way to promote his business and get more clients. Now, there are some of you who would have been listening to the series, and you might have had a nagging question at the back of your mind. Can this thing actually work? Can I actually create a podcast? Can I actually use content marketing strategies? Can I actually build a personal brand? And can I use that to grow sales? The answer is yes. And I'm going to talk about a former student of mine. In fact, I can't really call her a student because at most, I think we had 3 or 4 conversations, and she was really off to the races. So, she was just sharp. Like, I told her what to do, and she did. And anyway, so I'm going to give an example today to show you that these things are doable. Now, in her own case, you won't say that she grew her sales per se, but there definitely have been financial benefits for her in pursuing the podcast strategy that we outlined together. For those of you who are listening to this podcast for the first time, my name is Tavishima Ede. I'm a former lawyer turned business consultant. In fact, the lady we're going to talk about was my classmate back in university, Bafemi Awolowo University, the greatest university on the African continent, in fact, in the world. So, if you would love to connect with me, just like she did, but you don't happen to go to school with me, that's not a problem. You can call, you can send me a text message or a WhatsApp message on 080-6466-2140. If you've been listening along and you have questions about podcasting or your podcasting strategy, you're worried about how you're executing, maybe something is missing. If you have questions, reach out 080-6466-2140. I'd like to have a chat, and let's see if I can be of any help to you. Oh, and yes, I have no problem with answering questions for free. So if you're looking for free consulting, just let me know at the beginning of the chat, and we will answer only one question. But if you want any deep dive, you want us to go into a content calendar, you want us to explore cadence, you want us to explore your guest strategy, you want us to explore your calls to action in your podcasts and things of that nature, then we will have to book a proper consulting session. We can book sessions hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. It'll be up to you. And yeah, okay, so let's just leave it that way. So, can this thing work? Yes, it can. And I will tell you someone who did that. I'd like to take the credit and say, it was down to me. But honestly speaking, people who consult with me, discuss with me, talk with me, the people that see progress at the end of the day are people who just, take it and run with it. So sometimes, yeah, maybe there's credit because I can say, all right, I told this person 1 or 2 things to do. But at the end of the day, man, progress ultimately rests with them. And bear that in mind. If you do call me up, again, 080-6466-2140, whether you make progress or not, it's not about me. It's about you. I can tell you everything from, now to infinity. If you don't apply, we will not see progress. But if I tell you 10 things, you take 2 or 3 of those things and you run with it, any progress that you see is all up to you. So that's the right attitude. Okay, so now this particular podcast is called Trading Without Borders. The subtitle is Your Guide to African trade. Again, Trading Without Borders, your guide to African trade. Now, it's hosted by my former student, if I can put it that way, and also my former classmate back when we were in university. Her name is Omobola Adebola. And the Trading Without Borders podcast, she designed it as an audio guide so that people could understand the African Continental Free Trade Treaty. Some of you are wondering, what did you say? I'll repeat. The African Continental Free Trade Treaty. Now, the first conversation that we had was, she was even wondering, should I even be making a podcast about this thing? This thing is so academic. Should I make a podcast? That was the very first question. And when she asked me, I said, man, by all means, like this thing will be hot. She said, I said, definitely. Because, those of you who are on the outside and you look at podcasting, there's one thing you guys don't understand. You will look at the big podcasts like I Said What I Said, I Said What I Said, where again, Honest Bunch and all those big ones, those ones that get millions and millions and millions of downloads every single episode. And you think that's the way to go. But you guys forget that, or rather, you guys do not realize that it's not about the size of the audience. Let me repeat. It's not about the size of the audience. It's about how valuable the audience is. So for people who are on podcasts, who run podcasts like I Said What I Said, those just podcasts, and you're getting millions of downloads per episode, the audience is not really worth much. So you have to sell advertising revenue in order to make a living. And then, of course, that whole how many cents per impressions and blah, blah, blah. Then by the time you do that math, because, this advertising revenue is going to be coming in dollars or cents. And of course, Naira is useless. So even if it's only, I don't know, 1 cent or, half a cent that is coming in per impression, by the time everything add up to dollar and then you convert it to Naira, I think will make sense. And so because of that, people are trying to build podcasts that are as big and as broad as possible, talking about broad-based topics. And you guys don't realize that there's money to be made in the niche podcasts. Now, typically, when you have a niche podcast, what will happen is that the value of the audience will actually go up. Some of you will be wondering how. Okay, let me use Omobola's podcast to show you how that dynamic works. So remember, if you're Linda Ikeji, big blog, hundreds of millions of people, or you run a podcast, tens of millions of downloads every single episode, the actual monetary value of each person listening will be small. Kobo, kobo, kobo. But then you have a niche podcast, maybe only 120, I don't know, maybe only 120,000 listeners or something like that. And it's very niche. The value of the listeners will actually be high. I will use Mobola's podcast as an example. So this is what I explained to Mobola when we had our first conversation. I told her, look, this thing is beautiful. The African Free Trade, remember, her podcast is all about the African Continental Free Trade Treaty. It's a long name, so some of us just say the Free Trade Treaty. Now, the Free Trade Treaty, obviously, is about expanding international trade, on the African continent. Now, because Mobola and I went to school together in Obafemi Awolowo University, we both studied international trade under Dr. Pukboala. Yeah, Dr. Pukboala, Korege. Kind of eccentric, correct guy. So we both studied maritime law under Dr. Pukboala. We both studied international commercial law under Dr. Pukboala. What else did we study? We also studied international maritime law under Dr. Pukboala. So he was our lecturer for those three course modules. So because we studied that, the moment she said African Continental Free Trade Treaty, the thing made sense to me. Now, because I've been out of law for a very long time, it's something I know of, but not something I'm particularly interested in. But this is what I explained to Mobola, my dear sister. I told her, look, that this thing is perfect for a podcast She said, how? I said, the thing is very simple. When people hear the title of this podcast and when they hear what it is about, people either are in or they're out. There's no halfway. Like, look at my own podcast, Sales for the Nigerian Business Person podcast. People can be kind of in, they can be kind of out, it can be, oh, that sounds interesting. Okay, maybe I'll give it a shot. I'll listen to 1 or 2 episodes. Maybe. With my podcast, they can be maybe. But with Mobola's podcast, it is about the African Continental Free Trade Treaty. You're either in or you're out. A lot of you will see it and be like, podcast on top waiting again. And you will move. But for the people, excuse me, for the people, lawyers, merchants, people involved in the policy sector when it comes to international trade on the African continent. The moment they see this kind of thing, they'll be like, this kind of podcast day for Niger, they will subscribe. So that's why I told her that, look, this will be hot because this thing is so niche. People will either be in or out. There is no middle ground. Now the people who will be in, they will be in. Hoo-ha. Unlike my own podcast. People like my own podcast, you listen to 1 or 2 episodes and then you bounce. But for Mobola's podcast, it is specifically about the treaty. How much information is there about the treaty? Where will you find it? It's not as if in Nigeria and in Africa we do a good job of writing about these things anyway. So anybody who is in will be in. Anybody who is subscribe, go subscribe. And they will listen. Unlike podcasts like mine that are kind of general. Some people say my podcast is niche, and I say, nah, niche enough. A podcast like Mobile Zone, this is a real niche podcast. In fact, this is how niche it is. That 80% of you listening to this podcast right now, you still don't know what it is I'm talking about. You still don't understand what our podcast is about. That's how niche it is. But people who are in, they're in. And because they're in, the worth of the customer is a lot higher. It's not anyhow people that want to listen to a podcast that examines the legal and the policy perspectives around international trade in Africa. It's not any my kind of people. So when she writes a book or when she is speaking or when she wants to sell products, it's not my people that she will be selling these things to. Unlike me, for instance, I can be trying to sell product and some people will open their mouth and tell me, say, I don't get money. Do you think any of her listeners will say I don't get money? No. Our podcast is niche, narrowly focused. So, a tip to those of you who are thinking of a podcasting strategy. The more focused you are, actually, the better. The clearer on who it is you're trying to target, the better. All these broad podcasts, like it can work, but it's a lot harder. So, Mobula's podcast, the goal of it is to break down the complex world of moving stuff around Africa because all these things actually is complex. If you don't believe me, try exporting stuff to Ghana or Cameroon. You will understand that, man, this thing is hard. So, of course, our podcast now was not just going to be academic. She was going to be looking at real world issues when it comes to cross border trade. How do you move merchandise from Niger to Egypt? How do you move stuff from Niger to South Africa? How do you move stuff from South Africa to Democratic Republic of Congo? How? How do you break barriers in informal markets? What are the policy updates? What's going on in Nigeria? What's going on in Ethiopia? And then, of course, expert advice, because remember, she's a lawyer, and we happen to study all these things in school. And of course, she was also going to be interviewing experts from different sectors and from also different parts of the world, also talking about the free trade continental treaty. By the way, can you see the benefits of networking now for her, especially since it's in a very narrow field? So her podcast was around giving people strategy and insights so that they can succeed in international trade within Africa. So you can see that's the scope of her podcast. Very narrow. But from what I've said, you can see that's for those of you who haven't fallen asleep yet, listening to me describe the podcast, you can see that people are either in or they're out. There's no halfway. For my own podcast, it's more general. Some people are kind of in, some people are kind of out. There's people who listen to my podcast, 2, 3 months, they go away for another 6 months, come back again. For her podcast, you're either in or you're out. Same thing with the gossip podcast. Oh, you listen now and then, oh, you're enjoying the gist, and then, stuff comes up, you move on to another show, and then maybe you're back again. But for niche shows like this, you're either in or you're out. There's also another podcast that I heard of. He was a brain surgeon, but then he had to suffer this a neuro, what's it called, neuromuscular something condition. Basically, his body was shutting down, so he couldn't do surgeries again. So he had a podcast where he was talking about advanced surgery techniques, and the guy had a very small podcast, but his podcast is a paid podcast. The guy used to be a don before. His own is a paid podcast. So he's charging people good money in thousands of dollars so that they can listen to his show. Very small podcast. But meanwhile, every single person that listens to the podcast is paying him thousands of dollars. The show is very, very niche. And so the value of the audience is very, very high. He's talking about brain surgery. Brain surgeons. Don't they have money? Whether in Nigeria or in America. Are those the kind of people who will tell you that, oh, I no get money? The guy is a don. He's talking about brain surgery techniques. Brain surgeons, they get money, so they will pay the guy. Hope you guys see how it works. So I understand. It's good for the ego if your podcast is big, big, big and everybody knows your name. But sometimes monetizing your podcast is a whole lot easy when your show is small and niche. Anyway, so I've already given you the background. That's how the show began. Basically, she reached out to her classmates, that was me, because I had a podcast and she wanted to know, this is my idea of a podcast. Will this thing work? And I told her, this thing is fire. Start immediately. Oh, by the way, that was the best thing she did. She actually started immediately. Too many of you overthink this thing. I'm thinking of starting a podcast. In fact, for Shinarambo, I was surprised when he told me he started the podcast. Although I checked our older messages and I realized that from the moment I told Shinarambo, yeah, this is a good idea, start your podcast, it took him about, I think, 5 months before he started. Can you see why I tell you people, stop worrying about brand, stop worrying about design, this, that. Me and Shinarambo, we spoke. When did he start? 5 months later. Me and Mobola, we spoke. When did she start? She started immediately. We spoke this week. Next week, she don't record one episode. Quick. On the move. That's how things should be. You should stop overthinking things. Some things don't have to be this difficult. So my initial advice to her was, yes, this thing is fire. It will work. Go ahead. This will work very well. She trusted my advice and she trusted her instincts. Then the next thing I told her was that, look, too many people, when it comes to content marketing ideas and podcasting, the problem is that they overthink it. You overthink, you over strategize, you go begin the brand, you go begin the design and something. Before you know it, months will have passed and then, the ginger, the motivation will just subside. So my advice to her was, we need to move now. When we started talking equipment, I told her, Mobola, you need no equipment. I told her that every single podcast episode I had recorded at that time when I was talking to her, I recorded using my phone and I did not use a microphone. For those of you who have been listening for the last, couple of years, you know that what I'm saying is true. Because, okay, now I'm plugging a microphone into my phone, so it's kind of killing some of the noise, like the fan that is on and all that. That's why you guys don't hear the generator noise anymore, things like that. But those of you who've been listening from the beginning, you know now. You remember those days now, like when I'm podcasting and, maybe like the kids are not feeling well. I just whip up my phone and then it was like, oh, I beg no vex. I'm in the hospital. You hear noise once in a while. You guys know that what I'm saying is true. You remember the episodes when I recorded from the hospital or at the mechanic or in the car park? In fact, there's even one when I was driving my father-in-law around. He came to Abuja because there was a wedding, you know. And during the wedding, the bride went to go and change. And since I used to be in events, I know how that thing can be. When the bride goes to go and change, you'll be like 45 minutes before we see the bride again. There's some of you who remember the episode. It was an Ishan wedding because my father-in-law is Ishan. Ishan, like Edo State. I came outside of the wedding hall, whipped up my phone, started recording. And I said, I beg, moon, I no vex. Now wedding I did. But there's this thing that is on my mind. And then I started spitting straight. That's how I used to record. And I told Omobolanle, look, f- uh, any phone that you have is fine. Because those of you who've been here from the beginning, you've been with me through all the phones I've used. I've used Samsung Galaxy Duo, that small one we get two SIM. I've used that. I've used iPhone 5. I've used what again? I've used Nokia C1. That one was an Android Go phone. I've used what have I used again? Name it. I have used it. Right now, this particular episode I'm using, that Chinko phone that they use. Chinko. I'm using a Xiaomi or Redmi, as it's called in this part of the world. I've used it all. Expensive, all the way down to cheap. All of them, so long as it's modern phone. The inbuilt microphone quality is good. Don't waste your time. The thing that you have on your hand, the thing you're using to listen to this podcast now, if you want to start, is good enough. If you want to buy external microphone, it's okay. It's not a problem. The affordable alternatives right now. If I tell you guys how much this microphone costs now, the one I'm using to record this thing plugged into my phone, you will not believe me. 7,200. That's how much I bought it. I was walking through Ebano in Abuja. So for those of you who are based in the East or based in Lagos, because Ebano is also there, you've been thinking of podcasting and you're wondering, oh, cheap micro. Just go to Ebano. There's always a stand in Ebano where they have microphones for producing content and stuff like that. Go there. This is a wired microphone, 7,002. I just plugged the thing direct into my phone. The reason why I got the microphone was not because I need it. It's because, holding the phone, like, I've been holding the phone to record now. After a while, it gets tiring. The microphones are small. They're easier to hold. That's the reason why I got one. So my advice to mobile was very simple. You don't need anything again. The phone that you have is good to go. She said, what about noise? I said, no problem. This is what you do. You wait when you're in your office and all the other lawyers are out. Close the door, close the window. That's it. Problem solved. You now have your quiet background. That's it. If you're in your house, close the window so that generator noise will not enter. If you're still afraid, okay, no problem. Go into the children's room, open up the cupboard, sit in the cupboard. That thing will isolate, as it will block out all the noise. Quiet environment. Or I told her, go inside the car, turn on the AC, wind up the windows, leave the AC on 1. If you're leaving the AC on 5, the noise will bleed through. Leave the AC on 1. People will not hear nothing. They will even think you're inside the studio, so long as it is modern phone that you are using. The microphones are that good. So I told her, don't wait until you buy a laptop and buy, forget it, use your phone. Then I told her, the next thing that you need, content calendar. Because lots of people who start podcasts, they stop producing, they get bored, whatever, they can't keep up because they don't have a content calendar. So I told her content calendar is key. It's the first thing. And I told her that's the first thing you got sort out. And that was the first thing that she did. In fact, by the time she showed me the content calendar, and I saw the first 4 or 5 topics, I said, we're good to go now. Nothing remain again. I didn't even read the whole content calendar. I saw the first 4 or 5 topics and I said, babe, you're on point. Begin. Then the next thing was about hosting. I told her hosting, no problem. There's paid hosting options and then there's free. While you are deliberating on which paid hosting platforms to use, start on the free one. At the time, I was on Anchor. Anchor eventually got bought over by Spotify. That's how come my podcast is now on Spotify. So I told her, just hop on this Anchor and begin. Later on, if you don't like Anchor, you can migrate to a paid platform. Then I told her, apart from being on Anchor, RSS distribution, because what makes a podcast is your RSS feed. It's a technical something. I don't even understand it, so I won't even bother trying to explain it to you. But that RSS link, that's the thing that makes your podcast a podcast. So I told her, take the RSS thing, share it everywhere as far and wide as possible. And I told her, promote like a maniac. That's the only thing she disagreed with me. Because Mobola, she only promotes new episodes. Excuse me. So if she drops an episode today, brand new episode, she'll promote it. But then once she's done, she's done. So no, she doesn't promote like a maniac. But every other thing, she did. She ran with it. She didn't waste time. I told her I don't need to buy a separate laptop. Your phone is fine. Show me content calendar. The next day, she showed me content calendar. I looked at the first 5, 6 topics and I said, look, this thing is tight. Begin. That was it. The next week, she began. She ran with it. But of course, she made some changes. Number one, she invested in professional design and branding earlier than I did. I think within the first 2, 3 months, she had already paid somebody, to work on graphics and, blah, 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 and stuff like that. Well, yeah, she put her picture on it. So you don't have to follow my advice 100%. Because I advise you guys not to put your picture, but to focus on search engine optimization. Sorry, optimizing for the podcast to be found in podcast search engines. And so because of that, you have to use key terms. By the way, what is the title of our podcast? The title of our podcast is... Sorry, let me look for it again. Sorry, one moment. I'm trying to look for it again. Trading Without Borders, Your Guide to African Trade. Can you see that the key terms are there? Trading, Africa. Can you see? And then in the subtext, she says clearly that it's about the African Continental Free Trade Treaty. Can you see that those are key terms that lawyers, that policymakers, that international merchants will be searching for? Can you people see how you title your podcast? I advised her and she took the advice. Those of you who are calling your podcast chilling with Mobola, nobody knows what Mobola means. And who wants to chill with you when they don't know you? But then if you give it a boring title like this, Trading Without Borders, Your Guide to African Trade, then the subtext, blah, 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 something, something, African Continental Free Trade Treaty. Sorry, African Continental Free Trade Area. Can you see how people will find your podcast? Because the key terms are there. Those of you who want to start podcasts for business purposes, stop this whole thing of chilling with so, 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 and so, or in my own opinion, or honest opinion with so, 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 and so. People don't know you yet. You will establish a name and a brand and whatever for yourself eventually, yes. When that time comes, be putting your name all over the place because people will be searching for your name. So, if I do a good job at this, and let's say in another 10 years, me and Dangote and Tony Elumelu and the rest of us, all of us, they chill, we all they flex together. Of course, then people will be searching for my name. They'll say, this Tabishima guy, who is this nigga? Then they'll be searching for me. Then I can be putting my name, as the podcast title, chilling with Tavishima, or thoughts with Tavishima, conversations with Tavishima, tantalizing sales with Tavishima, whatever. But for now, it doesn't pay me. So anyway, she ran with it. She made some changes. She invested in professional design early, and she started using her podcast to leverage it for professional for networking. By inviting guests from different parts of the world and all that. And then, of course, inviting other people, bankers, lawyers, things like that. Now, was she always successful? No, because there were ups and downs. She only used to publish once a week. Okay, that's also another thing she changed because I told her to publish as often as possible, but she would only publish once a week. But the problem with publishing once a week is, now, Malaria, you catch malaria, you miss one episode. You have to travel for work, you miss another episode. You go for an international conference, you miss an episode. So because of that, if you check the podcast, you see that there are some things that are missing. You might see her publish, December, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And maybe January, week 1, week 2, she no day. Then week 4, she's back, you know. But that is normal. It's normal. By the way, that's the reason why I put out as many episodes as possible consecutively. And sometimes I don't care whether I post 2 or 3 times a day because I want to have something new for you guys every single week. But I know that if I decide to publish once a week, man, I won't be consistent. Anyway, so she didn't keep to that. So there are times that you see her, that sometimes you don't see her because, but be wood. These things happen. Now, to the core of the question. Since she started publishing the podcast, has she made sales? Yes and no. Because remember, Mobola is still in legal practice. I am not. So for her, you can't really say making sales because it's not as if she has items that she's selling 1, 2, 3, 4, or that there's coaching that she's selling like that. But since publishing the podcast, she has become a partner in her law firm. Partner is how will I put it? Partner is like a oga in the law firm. When you make partner in the law firm, it means you're a senior member of the firm, and it also means that you like you're a kashogi, you're a rainmaker. You bring in business for the firm. So since publishing the podcast, she's become a partner in a law firm, and I think her specialty is international commercial law practice, or something like that. So forgive me, I can't remember. Sorry, I'm recovering from a cold. Then she has also been speaking international, mostly on the African continent. For now, it's not bad. Kenya, Botswana, Uganda. She's been moving around. It's always small, small, small. By the way, for those of you, because some of you who listen to the podcast, you mean well, and you say, why don't I focus on an international market? It's very simple. I don't focus on an international market because it's going to make my journey a whole lot longer. Brian Tracy already exists. Grant Cardone already exists. Who else? Gary Vaynerchuk already exists. I can't go and start competing with them head on head. They already exist. If I try to compete with them, I will be seen as a photocopy. They'll say, who is this cheap knockoff? But then, if I dominate Nigeria, what will happen is my reputation will spread to Ghana. Then Ghana will begin to call me. Then from Ghana, Cameroon. From Ghana, Cameroon, other regions, Central African countries in Central Africa, eventually South Africa. By the time I dominate the African continent, all right, now them go they call me as an African expert. They'll say, oh boy, come over here as an African expert. Come and be on this round table. That's how it works. And that's why the focus of my podcast is Africa. And I told Mobola this is how it will play out. The African countries will call you to start talking first. Eventually, Washington, D.C., then Davos, World Economic Forum, eventually they will call them. But you dominate the African continent first. You make a name for yourself here first. Then they'll now say, oh, African expert, can you come here, sit at this round table? That's how the thing works. So yes, some of you say Uganda, that one be international. Yes, it's international. Yes, South Africa is international. It's still abroad. So yeah, she's been talking, and then she's now a partner. Now, by the way, I'm not saying that this podcast is the sole factor for these moves that she has made. But I'm just saying I won't be surprised if it helped. The fact that she's putting out this body of work on a highly technical and specialized field in international law, international commercial law, I think this thing helped. She even admitted to me how she has been using it to even book meetings with potential clients. She admitted that she used that thing to wow somebody. That she has a podcast. Say, wow, you have a podcast. Luckily, the woman knows what a podcast is. And the woman was smitten. Like, oh, you have a podcast on the Continental Treaty. Oh, really? Tell me more. That's how she booked meeting. Anyway, please understand me. I'm not taking glory for the progress that she has made. Because, like I said, the conversations I had with her, it didn't pass 4 or 5. She ran with it. You talk Monday, you talk Wednesday, you talk Friday, you talk Saturday. By next week, she moved. So actually, the glory is all up to her. So I'm not trying to steal her shine. But the reason why I waited and brought this to the end is because I wanted you to know that people like Shinorambo who reach out to me, they're in the financial services sector, they're in wealth advisory, they want to use a podcast to promote their business. And some of you are saying, nah, then Nigeria we did, that it won't work. I'm trying to show you that it can work. Because it can work for a lawyer, it can work for legal practice. It can work for something as boring, in quote, as the African Free Trade Continental Treaty. If it can work for legal, trust me, it can work for your own sector. Now, I don't want us to go too far because of what she has done now. Because there are some of you, for instance, who are in who are logistics operators, freight forwarding companies and stuff like that. For those of you who are doing supply chain, doing logistics, doing freight forwarding, can you see that there is room here for podcasting to work in your own field? Can you see? Somebody's doing it from a legal perspective. What stops you, a freight forwarder, from starting your podcast? What stops you? Yes, you will not blow because of that podcast. Because it will be small as hell. Imagine, as a freight forwarder, you're starting a podcast. Your podcast will be small as hell. Very small. But the thing is, it might attract manufacturers and it might attract retailers who are looking for a distribution network. That is where you come in. So don't worry if your idea is big. Don't worry if your idea is not the kind of thing that will blow or whatever. We can make this thing work. So if you think you're not creative enough to figure out how podcasting strategy can be used for business growth in your sector, call me 080-6466-2140. But remember, it's all on you. The most I can do is to tell you this is where the promised land is. You're the one that has to work it yourself. I can't do any of this for you. The best I can do is to tell you that this is where the promised land is. This is the map. These are the steps to take. So if you do call or send me a text message or a WhatsApp message on 080-6466-2140, please be ready to put in the work. And I said it at the beginning of the episode, I'm going to say it again now. If we have this conversation today, okay, today is a Saturday. Let's assume that you reach out to me on Monday. If we have the conversation on Monday, right? Even if you pay for monthly consulting, we have the conversation on Monday. If by Friday, Saturday, you're already telling me, oh, we're supposed to strategize, then I'm already telling you that, look, you are not going to get started and this thing is not going to work. Anyway, let me stop there. This is 40 minutes. Let me let you guys go. Anyway, reach out, connect. I love talking to you guys anyway. 080-6466-2140. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll catch you all some other time. And for those of you who've been thinking about long form content production and who've been thinking about podcasting, I hope that this series I did with our guy Shinorambo and him starting the podcast in the financial services and the wealth advisory space, I hope it has been eye-opening. So yeah, it can work. Okay, so that's it. That's done. I'll catch you guys some other time.